So in this section, we're going to finally guide you through the actual technique for transplanting. You've hardened off your seedlings. They've become acclimated to the environment that you're going to plant them in, whether it's a raised bed or containers. And now you're ready to actually do the transplanting. So one of the things I want to mention is that you want to transplant usually on ideally on a day where it's a little cooler, where it's cloudy, or even with a light rain. A light rain is kind of ideal because that kind of will help ease. It goes along with the hardening technique, and it will help to ease the shock for the actual transplanting and keep the roots hydrated while you're doing the actual transplanting. So the tools that you'll need to transplant, probably the most important one is something called a dibber. So this is essentially just a rod with a tapering end. You can buy them online, made out of wood, but I've also found that you can kind of make your own out of any kind of steel or aluminum pipe, so like a metal pipe. I use an aluminum conduit that's kind of leftover scraps from when I make low tunnels. So it's a 1/2 inch aluminum conduit. So you want it to be maybe like 8 to 12 inches long so that you can make a deep enough hole if you need to. You'll also need a watering can so that you can water the area that you're transplanting. You'll want to water that right after you do the transplanting. And then finally, if the soil that you're transplanting into is kind of clay or compacted, then you may need a shovel in order to loosen the soil. I do recommend that if the soil is too rocky, that it makes sense to try to remove the rocks before you actually try to transplant. So you're trying to loosen the soil a little bit. So the first thing is when you're doing the actual transplant, you want to preserve as much of the root system as you can. The way to do this that I do is you kind of you put your hand underneath the roots and try to lift and loosen the root system underneath the plant and lift that out very gradually. Then when you're transferring the plant to the hole that you're going to transplant it into, you don't want to hold the plant by the leaves or by the roots because it's quite likely that you'll rip those off. So the best place to hold the plant is actually right in the middle of the plant, and that gives you the best balance. It'll be easy to still transplant it, but you won't rip anything. The spacing for your transplants is important. What you're trying to do is take into account how big the plant will be when it's fully sized. So then you use a hexagonal, it's almost like a staggered planting grid for planting around that plant so that there's always that space between each of the plants so that as the plant matures, it's going to fill up that empty space in between the plants. What you'll find, for example, for a head of lettuce, which is maybe 6 or 7 inches wide, that this spacing is a lot more efficient than the spacing that's usually recommended on a seed packet. Finally, I'm going to show you, nothing explains things more than seeing them visually. Picture's worth 1,000 words, so I'm going to show you a little bit of video of me transplanting some lettuce seedlings using first a dibber and then using a small little trowel so that you can see exactly how you would go through that technique. So you can see, first of all, I'm making the holes with a dibber. I try to rotate it around a little bit. If you need more space than these little holes, I'm transplanting small seedlings in this case, but you can actually kind of work it around in a circle, and you can make these holes that you formed even bigger by working it around in a circle. So you can make holes that could be 3 or 4 inches in diameter that way as well. Now you can see I'm going to my tray of lettuces and I'm going underneath the roots to try to loosen the root system. These seedlings were planted a little too close together, so I've got to separate them first. And you can see once you get used to this, you can do this quite quickly, separating the roots without ripping them. These are quite small seedlings, so you may have plants that are quite a bit bigger than this with an established root system. But because lettuce are quite easy to transplant, even a small seedling like this is usually quite successful with the right varieties of lettuce. You can see I'm holding the seedling about halfway up its stem. So I dangle it into the hole, and then I try to stabilize the plant with the leaves above, and a little bit, I try to push down the soil to keep it firm. So you can see that's how you would do a transplant with a dibber. Now I'm going to show you how to do a transplant if you don't have a dibber and you have like a trowel. So you can make a kind of a wedge by you put the trowel in one side and then you put it on the other side. And if you have a clay soil, then you can actually lift it out kind of like a wedge. The rest of the process is quite similar. You'll have a slightly bigger hole than you would with a dibber, but then you try to form the soil around the roots, press down so that it's stable. After this process, you want to water the plants quite heavily so that the root system can start to extend its roots into its new environment.